So, hello everyone. This is a panel called the Impact of AI on Society, and I have a very esteemed list of panelists. And I had a real crisis last night, like because I was looking up at all their LinkedIn profiles and trying to give a good introduction to all of them to do justice to everyone, and it was not possible because it's like their achievements are like 2 miles long, and it's going to take me like 35 minutes to finish introducing them, and the panel is only 30 minutes long. So I'm just going to have a short introduction to all of our panelists. This is a fraction of their achievements and their accolades, so bear with me. So I'm going to start with Professor Mayank Kejarwal. Did I get that right?
Mm-hmm.
He's a professor and the lead researcher in the Center on Knowledge Graphs at USC Information Sciences Institute with a focus on developing high impact artificial intelligence technology for addressing important social challenges such as human trafficking and disaster response. He has delivered talks and workshops at over 20 international academic and industrial venues, published more than 40 peer reviewed articles and papers, and in 2019, he was nominated for the Forbes 30 Under 30 in the science category and is the co author of the textbook on knowledge graphs, MIT Press. Ooh. I mean, that's a very short introduction of Professor Mayank. And Toju Duke, who is a rock star by herself and a rock star at Google, but that's not her official title. I think we should petition Google to change that. But her official title at Google is Project Manager at Google's Machine Learning Fairness and Product Lead for Europe, Middle East, Africa, with over 15 years of experience spanning across advertising, retail, not for profits, and tech. She is also the project manager for Women in AI Ireland and founder of Refine, a tailored business and career coaching services for small businesses. Toju has a keen interest in ethical AI and transparency, focusing on examining bias in datasets. Toju is an advocate for transparent and bias free AI aimed at reducing systemic injustice and furthering equality. Okay, she's also committed to ensuring AI drives social good while acknowledging all backgrounds and cultures of society. And the list goes on, but I, have, I have to shorten it. So, and then I'm moving on to
It
our,
sounds like you're not going to have any time left for discussion.
yeah, that's what
I
I
can
feel
do
like.
it. I think
Lucia,
we've got the
Lucia,
whole. Go ahead.
Lucia Dinapoli is an assistant dean at the University of Pennsylvania for the last 3 years, and she has a portfolio of projects and initiatives that drive excellence at the number one ranked school of nursing in the world. And she has 12 years of experience at innovating strategies to improve everything from sustainability, climate change. And in 2019, she started her own consulting firm called Trajectory Consulting. And that's as if it wasn't enough, she holds like several masters, and now she's doing another master's in philosophy. And she's fascinated by the intersection of health, environment, and natural innovation and social justice. Dr. Michael Akinwami, a PhD in applied mathematics, and is the director of risk sciences and analytics at Trust Science, Edmonton, Canada. He has a deep technical background that covers end-to-end development of scalable custom machine learning solutions, and of course, he's a peer reviewer for many journals and a multiple, multiple avenues for research intersecting social economy, politics, and security. And finally, Dr. Rachel Hendricks is a scientist and solutions architect and the Health Policy Council and a health lead for the Future of Privacy Forum's Health and Genetics in Washington, D.C. And she also has 12 years of experience at the intersection of health, information security, privacy, and understanding, consumer understanding. She holds a Doctor of Health Science, Master of Art in Legal Studies, and a Master of Science in Pharmacology and Toxicology. And That was the most briefest introduction I could give to each one of my esteemed panelists. I'm really sorry because I could not fit all of your achievements in one shot. I just want us to get to the discussion very soon because we have like a very short amount of time. So the title of this one is called The Impact of AI on Society. I picked this title because it is so ubiquitous and so common everywhere. Like everybody wants to use this, and it's the most commonly used title for research papers. And I think, believe in the last 5 years, like everybody has written about it. And I can't say that I have read everything, but I have read most of them. And whenever I am like trying to understand what they are saying, is like either it's the positive impact of AI or the negative impact of AI, but they don't give us a concrete, insight into how we can align those values between the human values and the artificial intelligence's values. So, and its role in society. So there's always this consensus on how, artificial intelligence is good, but it needs some protections to protect people's privacy and their values. But then there is no consensus on what those values are. So my question to all the panelists is, what are the human values that you think we should protect in the next 5 years? And if you had like a chance to stand on the precipice of AI's rise, I mean, before it got to the place it is now, what would you have done? So, any one of you can start, and then you can all go. Maybe I will pick Dr. Rachel.
Sure, absolutely. I was going to actually volunteer to go first, so you and I were on the same page. So that's a really, really good question. And I personally feel that if we're going to implement AI in any kind of way, we have to uphold humanity's values around three things, really. The first being the value of being seen and being heard and being represented um, in a way that actually will control for any bias and also uphold fairness when AI is implemented across a multitude of settings, whether AI is used to um, allow individuals to become insured, receive job opportunities, um, gain access to housing, transportation, those kinds of things. And then also values around lessons learned. For example, we can't know where we're going unless we know where we've been. And that's really important to make sure that we halt any cycles really of harm or abuse that came before us. We want to make sure that AI is not perpetuating harm or abuse or even discrimination um, because those uh, because those activities were extant in the past. And we don't want our AI models to perpetuate that in a way that does not allow us to move forward as society and as civilization. And then also upholding values around governance standards and procedures that are evidence based. That's also very important to make sure that we all have common ground on how AI should be used, if it should be used, and also how it should be used to make sure that um, AI is not abused by various parties, and to make sure that it's implemented fairly or in ways where all sides of the story can be heard and action can be taken in the best way possible.
I think those are wonderful. Dr. Rachel, I want to add to that, that when I was thinking about the question, I found myself considering the longstanding tension that has existed in society, humans and technology, right? And thinking about that friction that's been there. And oftentimes it's due to not understanding what it is, not seeing its use, the messaging around it. But I also wanted to consider the different lenses by which to think around the question. When AI is built, when you talk about the actual algorithms, I've had the opportunity to speak with some of our theorists and computer engineers at Penn who really believe that AI is still in a very nascent stage, although it is ubiquitous, as Susanna said, is found itself in the energy in smart homes, in all of these areas, in healthcare. But at the same time, it's the building of it, the embedding these values, and then the issue of defining those values, which is our exercise today. Which value do we truly believe is the most important or the most valuable to society, or that crosses different peoples and different cultures? And that made me think around two last points. The fact that our understandings are so centered around our culture, different lenses, the locale in which the technology is being introduced, made me land in the area of respect, finding definitional worth of how do we define fairness and privacy. And I landed in respect. I feel like if we begin in respect, which goes to your thought about being seen and represented, having more people of color as coders and engineers, talking across different disciplines, I think we could make some headway.
And yeah, I would just like to add to what Lucia just mentioned. Especially, I like to focus on the aspect of understanding, right? So one thing I've seen is that I'm yet to meet a person who doesn't have the desire to grow or improve his or circumstances if you actually explain what needs to be done, right? And that's coming from explainability or interpretability of AI or machine learning algorithms, right? So I think the value that I would like to actually be preserved is being transparent, being able to actually explain what individuals need to do if they want to improve their chances. Maybe one good example that I like to give is if you take, let's say, a credit scoring example, right? So if you're being denied, if your application for credit is being denied, right, and you have no clue as to why it's being denied, right? But I think you have the right, right, to know what you need to do so that next time you come around, you'd at least have improved your chances of getting that. And this actually applies to different areas, right? Just like Susanna mentioned, this is ubiquitous in our society. There are disparities, discrimination, but as long as we actually drive our efforts towards making sure that these algorithms that are being used, they are explainable. Like even to a layman person, I think we'll be actually making progress towards having a equitable society. But one thing I like to say is, I always reflect on what our society looked like before AI, right? So somehow, some way, humans actually, we all have cognitive biases, we make decisions and all that, right? And all these data that are biased, they are propagating through our system. But thank God we have AI that is, the way I look at it, the analogy I use is the analogy of a mirror that is reflecting on our faces, actually showing to us, exposing all these biases that we have in our data. But I think to the question that Susanna asked about what if I'm standing on the is it precipice of time or something, like what would I like to change, right? Now, agreed that AI is probably not matured yet, but because all these bias data are still being used in predictive space, right? Things that that are wrong, you're still using it to make predictions that will keep, is more like what's the feedback loops, right? So I think one thing I would like to see changed is that we actually move from predictive machine learning to prescriptive, which is whatever decisions you're making, you should actually be able, if the algorithm you're proposing is going to contribute to our society, you should be able to prescribe to people what they need to do to actually improve their situation and circumstances.
I love that. I love that new take on that. What do you think, Mayank, Professor Mayank?
Yes. So I agree with both things that were just said, which is that the AI is very nascent. I mean, I would not use the word nascent, but I would I agree that it's not there. I think, and that's maybe the what the point was. It's not there yet, and it's because of the other reason that was brought up. They're not explainable. I think the neural networks, a lot of the technology we have now, they are not really explainable. So it seems like the new AI, they are very good at prediction, but they are very bad at explanation. And so that's one of the problems. My takeaway from that I would really like to push in response to your question, Susanna, is I think no person should be left behind, and we all agree on that. But the one thing I would like to add to that is that no culture should be left behind. And there's very real danger that some cultures are being left behind. So, for example, um, and since you also mentioned some, that the concrete examples are often missing in the literature, I'd like to give one concrete example. So in one of the projects that I worked on for several years, and it's there in my slides, is disaster relief using AI and social media in developing countries, and specifically developing countries where the language, or parts of developing countries where the language is not English, right? So, for example, I come from the city of Calcutta in India, and there are many millions of people who speak Bengali. In India and in other countries in Africa, you have very rich cultures. Where you have people who speak different languages. But unfortunately, what's happening is that a lot of the new AI tools like natural language processing and so on that you might have heard about are designed for major languages like English and so on. And so to convince yourself of that, you just need to go to Google Translate, and you can translate like French to English, or you can try to translate a language which many millions of people speak, but you will not see a good translation. And for some languages, you might not see a translation. So in some sense, we are driving the extinction of these cultures, and tribal cultures, other cultures where they don't have the computational resources or the technology is not there yet, but we might see this inequity go up. So I'm very concerned about this, that, we might be seeing extinction of certain cultures, being accelerated by, through the overwhelming focus on certain languages and on certain, a narrow range of what the human civilization is capable of. So I really hope that we can come together. I think this is starting to get recognized in the community, in the AI community. I'm trying to bring it up even more in whenever I go to technical conferences, that can we start looking at everyone, not just English, not just Western cultures, but other cultures as well, because otherwise we risk leaving them behind. Yeah.
Yeah, that I think I do agree with you. It's the languages, the indigenous languages and the rare languages, we are losing them. We are losing them rapidly. I found like something like 2 or 3 die per year.
Yeah.
I was like, blown away, but we have lost them like forever, right? So that's that's one value I think we should focus, because language was the mode of communication for us for forever, right?
Yeah.
It precedes everything else, even visual. So I think that is one value I think we should focus on. So what does Toju say on this? She here?
Yeah, she suddenly went offline, so maybe she's rejoining.
Well, while we wait for her, I'd like to add a comment along that same vein about culture. I think that's super important, but I also think that it's probably even more important to make the distinction between culture and practice, because they're obviously not the same things, and have some practices within certain cultures that are not always fair, or not always to the benefit of those who live within that culture. And for that reason, I think it causes us to sort of take a look in the mirror and think about what we don't want to perpetuate as practices, even within our own cultures within AI. So it really forces us to take a hard look at ourselves, to say, okay, we saw that some previous generations before us did these things that are obviously questionable, or that we obviously, might not agree with, doing today. And I think every generation has to ask themselves that question when they think about sins of the past. So going back to my point about not perpetuating um, practices that can be perceived as harmful or discriminatory, that's extremely important, I believe, drawing on those lessons learned to make sure that we're not perpetuating stereotypes and biases and other things that cause individuals to miss out on important opportunities that could be available if the AI weren't there in the first place.
I like to add to comment about culture, but now that we have told you, so yeah, maybe after then I can add one or two comments.
Yes, Tojo, like I would like to get your thoughts on just before you left, Mayank was sharing about the lost languages and how that is one of the values, and Dr. Rachel was sharing about how we should not perpetuate the same biases that we had before AI came into the present. So could you add your viewpoints on that?
Yeah, I think for me, I was just thinking of most of the human values that we have. So we'll probably tie in with the conversation that I missed. But I mean, a few of them is like love and empathy and consideration and acceptance and listening skills and all of that. And usually when we apply human values, it gives us the ability to have ethical values. And ethical values could be like justice and integrity and refusal to be violent and refusal to kill and murder and all of that. And if we apply that, so if we hone in and I say, okay, I want to choose one particular human value, I feel all human values are important and I don't believe we should drop any. But assuming I want to hone in on one, I'll choose acceptance. And I think that's what Professor Mayank was talking about as well. So acceptance, and where does acceptance lie in the overall human society and human ethics and values. So if I look at acceptance as a human value, and in terms of ethical value, I think of justice, and I combine them together, acceptance ideally should be integrated in any ethical AI principles of any organization, of any government, of any company or any business. And let's assume that's been implemented. It's part of the ethical AI principles. Every ML engineer, data science engineer, whoever is building the AI data sets has that at the top of their minds, that we have to build models that are accepting to everyone. That means that those models and those data sets are diverse enough to include every culture, every ethnicity, every language, every sexual orientation, every gender. Now, when we have that, and assuming we're applying that to justice, for instance, right? When we hone into like criminal justice systems that are currently using AI, if they were built on these principles, the problems we're seeing with criminal justice today, we would not see them. We will not see a young man who has been falsely accused of a crime he did not commit, losing his whole job, his whole life, his car, because facial recognition software went wrong, all because it was built on the wrong values. So, I mean, one of the recent research results that have come out recently by ProPublica actually show that, for one of the software used for criminal justice systems is only 20% correct. And people of color are always wrongly accused, or the prediction is wrong by 77% rates. And these are already being used by a lot of law enforcement agencies today. So honing back on just having basic principles, going down to the human values, ethical values, making sure that we want to build models that are accepting everybody, and they have acceptance and justice included in them, for example, for the criminal justice systems, then I believe, AI tomorrow will be a better system than what we have today.
So going on Toju's, main point that acceptance is one of the values that she will pick. I do agree with that. Like that would like cover everything, right? If you could only model acceptance into AI. So I see a lot of you are actual AI experts here. So how do we model acceptance into an AI?
I think, if I may add, before even answering the question of modeling it, like the way I see acceptance and culture preservation is like it's probably going to be difficult if you don't have a diverse team of people coming from different backgrounds, different cultures, right? Working on the same project, but having different perspectives, right? So I think that core piece is very, very important. Otherwise, we'll keep churning out algorithms that will actually drive some of these cultures or values into extinction. So I can remember there was a time, just recently actually working on a computational linguistics project. And I was just trying to translate something to my own mother tongue. And like, it was a really, really horrible translation, right? But I could imagine it's actually difficult, probably difficult for people who are working on that project if they don't have understanding of other languages. So acceptance would also aid a culture preservation. That's one point that I just like to add.
I like
To add to that, Mike, I think that one of the things that we've seen in other disciplines is the idea of interdisciplinary teams, of having not only multiple multicultural voices, but multidisciplinary ones, so that you have ethicists working with the engineers, that you have AI specialists working with sociologists and psychologists and criminologists, and really understanding that the openness with which that we expect from AI, that acceptance, that level of human value has to begin at the very beginning, at that acknowledgement of what the problem is that we need to solve, and that all the voices be representative. And I feel like we kind of keep coming back to that representation, how and how these systems are actually built from the very beginning. Very difficult to course correct afterwards. It's certainly when we have other systemic issues. And in the US, we have systemic and structural racism that is so pervasive that it's very difficult to get at the root causes. So more power to interdisciplinary teams.
Yeah, no, that's so what I've seen also in practice is that oftentimes there is a lot of pushback, resistance, even coming from the core data scientists, right? Because like usually, I think the defense line is the evidence is in the data. That's what the data is telling you. So even if you have, I'm on board with you that we have interdisciplinary team, right? But probably we can actually add one or two thoughts on how to address issue of resistance or pushback from people that just want to focus on the evidence or in the bias data.
This has been a really great discussion, and you guys are like bringing in so many points. I mean, like you have brought in culture, acceptance, and criminal justice, and not perpetuating the same biases. Like I see the overlapping concepts here, and I actually see like if we could continue this discussion for another 1 or 2 hours, we might actually have a solution. Like we may bring out even a much better document than the SLMR principles. I know many of you may have heard that, and I was very disappointed in that. But we just ran out of time because I think it wasn't enough time for us. But it's been so amazing to meet all of you, and it has been my privilege actually in life to talk with such experts like yourself, and to be granted this opportunity by Data Ethics for All. So I'm very thankful to everybody, and I hope in another panel we can all meet together and continue this discussion. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Having us.
Thank you, everyone.
Pleasure.
Thank you, everyone. This is awesome.